Hey, join me as we explore the most captivating moments from my interviews over the last 3.5 years. I've had the privilege of speaking with some incredible people about their experiences with UFOs and UAPs. This compilation features some top highlights, including discussions with military insiders, pilots, and researchers who have witnessed and studied UFOs and UAPs, some for decades. If you're curious about what's really out there, stay tuned and consider subscribing. Chris Lehto, welcome to LehtoFiles. So 35,000 feet altitudes, if it's something up at above 29,000 feet, then it's higher than the world record for helicopter flight, landing at least.
Yeah, I don't know how long a helicopter can stay up at those altitudes either, but it'd probably take a lot of fuel to get up there. I wonder what the time on station would be because, if we're going to entertain helicopters as a theory, that helicopter would have to get to those altitudes and then maintain up there longer flight time than an F-18.
Yeah, I think it goes to drone technology, because the only thing I could consider, I guess if you had high winds and you had a helicopter and it was flying exactly into the wind at 120 knots, then that could be a possibility.
Yeah, you'd need something you need a really windy day, but that would still be impossible to be like perfectly still.
Exactly. Yeah, so it just seems like that that is really the one kind of indicator there for me that it's breakthrough. So how do you know that they were there? Like, how can you confirm that it was the same target? Normally it's 20
We
seconds.
can't. And I've tried to say that before, right? We can. I admit there's very clever ways that perhaps new objects could be traded in and out in a manner that was invisible to us via some technological magic, perhaps. But that's just the reality of the situation because we haven't had eyes on these objects or sensors on these objects for continuous periods of time. That's just not to my knowledge. So to answer your question, we can't. But common sense logic and at this point indicates to us that massive operation to exchange these objects perhaps from submarines or something that at this stage in the game has been occurring on a regular basis for almost a decade starts to kind of loses some of its believability for me to consider that as a viable option. Now if we zoom way back to 2014, if we look at it in isolation at that point in time and say, how could this be happening? That seems feasible to me. And even us, we weren't willing to say it was unexplainable at that point. We assumed it was some type of drone or something. But fast forward 8 years with all the attention and activity that's gone into it, I think that looking at it under that context makes it hard to think that would be the case.
And also just personally, right? You said you saw these things on the radar, right? You went to intercept it. Either you were waiting, you basically had excess time, essentially, using the gas. So you go and intercept this thing. You can't see anything with your eyes, right? Visually, within safe distance, say a few thousand feet, maybe.
We get 500 feet if we could, but
Really,
usually
yeah.
coming up low if they were consistent. But I can't speak for everyone, but that was just my experience. And we had more time too, because when we're off the coast of Virginia Beach, where we don't have those fuel concerns, and it might just be a flight. Hey, we need to go figure out some training to do. So go program a few weapons into the jet and go burn an hour of time. So sometimes you have more opportunity to go mess around. Yeah.
Exactly. And this is actually good training, I think, actually. I can't think of much, especially, if you have two people and you're of air-to-air loadout and you want to practice dogfighting or something. But, if you just have some, you're in an air-to-ground loadout or something and you have time, it seems like locking something up, trying to intercept it is good training. I think trying to identify these UAPs could actually be decent training, I guess is what I'm proposing.
Better than doing it on airlines.
Yeah, exactly. So we already do that. So yeah, and then the video, man, what is your take on the gimbal video, I guess? What do you so what do you have you heard the whole argument on it being the gimbal inside of the targeting pod?
Loosely, I haven't looked into the math, so to speak, but Yeah, but
seems
these guys
pretty.
had this thing on their camera systems and on the radar for like 5 minutes. Like they flew out of their way to intercept this.
Yeah,
There was a formation of the fact that this is something in their and they just came from an air-to-air combat flight. You know what I mean? So I
yeah.
mean, with a perfectly working system. So it just doesn't make sense to me that this would be some type of weird camera issue that no one had ever seen before. Yeah, I don't know how else to address that.
Well, I think so for me, like the turning actually is compelling, and the only reason I was able to do it is able to see it. Even the argument was if I covered up, if I covered up the gimbal, basically, if you cover this up, I wish I could do it somehow. Maybe I can. Yeah, but anyway, if you cover this area up with your hand, and then if you try and see, you feel where you think it would turn. When I raise my hand, I can see that it turned, meaning that there's information in the background. I would try it. I guess just cover up when you get a time on your own. Is you cover up the gimbal with your hand and then try and guess, without seeing any other indications when it turns. And I was able to tell that. I lift my hand. I'm like, yep, that's where it turns. So I think his argument that it's inside the system, at least just from my opinion, is viable, but it shouldn't look like this anyway. Like it's, the reason I think you and I have never seen this before, it doing something weird like that is because it shouldn't look like that anyway inside of 10 nautical miles. It shouldn't be this weird monocolor, glare thing, whatever it is.
Yeah, I'll have to take a look at that, but I think that there's a lot more information that can be gleaned off of the radar data situational awareness page that provides context of where these aircraft or objects came from, where they originated from, how long our systems were tracking, and that stuff's captured in the system. It might not be processed and presented to a particular pilot, but as the aircraft and the ship sensors are looking out into the sky and doing their job, that information lives in the system. So going forward, I'm not saying it's all saved somewhere, but going forward, that's information that can be gleaned out of the system. We can capture those radar tracks and build an analysis of the objects and their behavior and perhaps their origin, time on station, all these parameters that we care about. That when the government releases these videos, we're never going to get to the bottom of anything. We're just going to churn and churn and churn and churn and churn and waste time when we could be looking at hard data, which they have but are not releasing, that could provide answers, right? So I see a lot of these kind of video type conversations as pointless because no image that is ever released from the government will ever be trusted 100% by anyone, especially in this modern age. An image of something is not viable proof of anything.
What do you think
That
of
goes for
multiple
Gimbal too,
images?
right? Like these are exceptional and they're strange, but it doesn't prove anything. It shows that there is something anomalous that needs to be investigated, but it's impossible to draw a conclusion from this.
And do you think they'll ever release more information? I mean, can we get them to release more?
Well,
Like,
that's what I've
what
been
happens
spending the
after
last
this?
5 years trying to do, with building different organizations to apply, be able to provide solutions technologically and scientifically so that we can investigate this and expand the amount of people that have the willingness to look into this, right? Because if we're not all bound by our fear and our shame of looking into this, then there's a lot more people and power that can be brought into this conversation. And same
How
with
do you verify the credibility? With it's also a very kind of sensitive topic. When someone talks to you, how do you verify them?
Well, first thing is your own instincts. You can stand there, look at them, and say, "Geez, is this baloney or is this real? Or are they performing for me? Versus or because some people want to impress you, or they just want to be part of the conversation, and so they literally start percolating stuff up, and you can see it. You can see it. What's more interesting to me is how seriously they take it. Are they frightened? Am I getting indicators from them that they're trying to talk about something they don't want to talk about? That they're struggling with it. And then the next thing is does the incident itself more or less fit inside the guardrails of what we understand the phenomenon to be about? I've spent a lot of years looking at this, and there are things that are the trend in it. And then there's outlier data. I don't dismiss the outlier data, but I put it outside the main channel, and outlier data involves occupant cases that involve descriptions of things that aren't common. They're not the little gray guys with the big black eyes. They're something else, right? This kind of thing. But a lot of it is instinctive. You need to be really familiar with the data, and then you need to listen to them. I've had people try to BS me on stuff I was, because of my familiarity with the case history around the subject, I knew that they were cherry picking information, and I knew which cases they were pulling it from, to try and manipulate me or lead me as an investigator. But generally speaking, credibility involves people who are not looking for attention, people that are sincere and are not trying to capitalize on their experience. They're not running out and broadcasting to everybody that, they've seen this stuff. Chances are they're sensitive to their careers and they don't want that information floating around out there. I have a lot of respect for pilots when they come to me because they have something to lose, and there's every chance that they will be penalized for talking about their incident with their managers or even with the guy in the seat next to him.
That happened with a certain airline, I think, that flies near your
Mhm.
state.
Yeah,
I think they
absolutely.
did that.
And Dr. Haynes used to tell a story about how he knew a guy that was a commercial pilot, and he was flying his family across Nevada and stopped to pick up gas somewhere, some little airstrip out in the middle of nowhere with a gas pump, and bought a card that said, some kind of ET contact card thing. And it was just a joke put in his wallet. He's a pilot, right? So I hear they have a sense of humor. Okay. And so he shared that with the guy in the seat next to him and they ended up in a psyche eval.
Really?
Yeah. Well, it's competitive in the cockpit there for commercial pilots. So
How recent is this? Or
it's an old story. That's an
yeah.
old story. But it was part of our reason for establishing NARCAP to begin with and to advocate for pilots and air traffic controllers because they see these things. They have everything to lose by talking about them. There's no channel for them to discuss it and all of the information that they share that's aviation safety related leaves the aviation system. And so now we're in a cusp moment where that's not going to happen anymore. We saw the NTRB slides. We're doing some work at AIAA to support that effort as we can, or to make recommendations around that effort. And it's what needs to happen. In my opinion, we start getting all commercial reporting into a single channel and then end up in a nice, transparent, accessible bin that has a strong chain of custody. So that and then we do analysis, we do that work. If we have to go the long way around and they don't give us 20 seconds of really good multi-sensor data, then that's what we
What is it a problem if people want to remain anonymous? Does that
No,
set up any red flags or anything in your brain? Or
no. It's par for the course. In fact, if they want to be anonymous, it's kind of hard for them to capitalize on the case, isn't it?
yes.
So that anonymity is actually part of, assessing their character. It isn't a disqualifier if they aren't going to be anonymous, but it's another indicator that you're dealing with a serious person who wants to talk seriously about something they've seen.
Hmm.
So again, we've come from a place where we're dealing with anecdote and we're starting to move to instruments. And with that, and some of those instruments are simple, they're cameras, but eventually there's going to be more than that moving around out there. At NARCAP, we have over 100 years pilot cases. Our
100
earliest
years.
our earliest pilot case is 1916.
How have you felt with the whole Grusch release? Do you think it's gone well? What do you think about them going into his background, or are you happy with how everything's come about with David Grusch in general?
Yeah, I think it's gone well. I think the fact that he was able to testify before Congress is unbelievable when you think about they were sitting there asking him questions about crash retrievals under sworn testimony before Congress. That is just a stunning development, irrespective of the specifics of maybe what should or shouldn't have been discussed. I mean, I just think in looking at the bigger picture, it's just an amazing development. And I was in the room. I think you were there too. And
Yes,
how
barely made it. Yeah.
to be there, right? For that. I mean, I could hardly believe it. So, Yeah, I'm very happy with the way it's gone. Of course, there's always pushback. There was that one reporter who focused on the fact that Dave Grusch had PTSD as if that was something bad.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's not. He was completely treated for it, and any veteran who goes through trauma is going to have PTSD. It's completely common. They obviously tried to use it as a way of denigrating him. It didn't work. It did not work at all.
I think most of us have PTSD on our I have it. It's listed, Yeah. I mean,
yeah, especially people who are in combat situations or, went through what David went through. I mean, I feel like in a way, it's heroic for someone to have PTSD because it means they've done something to serve their country that was a very heroic and traumatic thing for them to do. Whatever it was that happened to them, they should be honored for it. So it just seemed like that whole article backfired. And there really isn't dirt that you can dig up on David Grusch. He's absolutely credible. He was highly respected within the intelligence community. That's why so many people were willing to talk to him and share the information that they did. Obviously, they've tried and they haven't come up with anything. And I'm not at all surprised. He's absolutely brilliant and just highly credible person. And that's why he was able to bring forward this information at the level that he did. That's why the story is so important. It's not like someone on their deathbed, who has a story to tell about Roswell, right? This is a completely different level here. I consider this to be as important as the 2017 story in terms of the David Grusch story. I think it's just as significant and just as much of a turning point. It's just meeting with more resistance because it's asking a lot more of people to accept that there could be these programs with crash retrieved objects. And we do need more investigation to be done to bring out more information about it. But just the fact that that topic is being brought forward and that it was part of a congressional hearing and that it has been, information about it has been submitted to the ICIG, the Intelligence Community Inspector General, is very, very significant, in my opinion.
How confident were you that he was going to testify? Did you know he was planning on it?
Yeah, I mean, I think as long as he was asked to testify, he was going to testify. I had no doubt about that. And I do remember knowing ahead of time. I think it took them a while to ask him because it took them a while to get the date and to get everything rolling. It was all and then it was kind of fast, the whole thing. But I knew that he would if he was asked to. Absolutely. Yeah.
And he's just been such an amazing example of, how to do it correctly. And he's taking so many spears and his demeanor has been so excellent throughout the whole thing. I'm very happy with David Grusch's, at least his UAP hearing and his exclusive interviews have been excellent, I think.
I agree with you.
All right. So,
Okay, cool.
And my interest began in 1998 or 9. I'm going to forget which, but I'll tell you the story.
Okay.
I was a rider, what's called a rider. That means I was on a submarine, but I was not a member of the crew. I was an intelligence officer, and I was doing intelligence operations on board the USS Hampton. Now, I'm not going to tell you what those operations were because it's classified. I'm just going to state that I was on board. And there was a time when we needed to, let's just say, leave the area quickly where we were. So we left the area quickly. We went out in the middle of nowhere, and we were running deep and fast. And deep and fast are both classified numbers, so I won't be saying that.
Yeah,
And
what is
all
it like
the-
on a submarine? I've never been on it, man. It just seems like just an amazing piece of technology.
Yeah,
the
so
giant
if
I've
people-
never seen one actually.
The one picture that people can see of me on the sail of the USS Hampton can be found on qrz.com. And if you do a search for N4HY, you will find a picture of me on there. Search for N4HY, and you will find a picture of me on the sail of the USS Hampton that's me on the sail of the USS Hampton, leaving wherever I was. We were just headed out to do our operation, and you can tell from the bow wake that we are full speed ahead.
Oh, how
And
fast
that's my Institute for Defense Analysis ball cap on my head. And the captain took this picture while we were underway. So shortly after this, we went under, and we stayed under for a while until we had to leave where we were quickly. So while we left, we were underway, and it was between my shifts. And all of a sudden, I heard something really strange. And there's depth gauges on the walls, a lot of places inside a submarine. So I knew how deep we were. And I could tell, because being a person with a full-blown security clearance, I got to go aft into the engineering compartments. I got to go inside and see where the reactor was operating. And that's number one. And number two, which I won't talk about, but in addition to that, they explained to me how, yes, that's the Hampton. They explained to me how the screws are kept quiet, so the submarine is hard to track. And it was amazing technology. Okay, so we were underway, and all of a sudden I hear this sound. It's really strange, because it's clear that what is going on is something is whizzing by us, and it's moving so fast. I just can't believe it, because this submarine is limited in the speed it can go by the incompressibility of the water in front of it. And this thing blew by us like we were standing still. Now, I'm not going to throw anybody else under the bus here, but I guarantee you the following happened. A person with knowledge of onboard systems came out and said, "Oh my God, this goddamn thing is going faster than the speed of sound underwater, but that's faster than the speed of sound in air. Nothing can move faster than the speed of sound in air underwater, because water's incompressible." There was no cavitation. It was just weird. And so there you go. That's my story about the USOs.
That's amazing. Yeah. So, yeah, I have so many questions there. Obviously, a lot of classified stuff. My first question is, can you tell a submarine is going deeper or shallower when you're in it? You know, if you're
yeah. Because
you can tell.
You feel this when it changes the bow angle, and
Yeah.
you can hear the screws change speeds. And if you're in the right place, you see a depth gauge. There's a depth gauge. There are depth gauges all over the boat. You can read how deep you are from the wall and in the compartment you're in. Yep.
And when you say you saw it go by, you know?
No, I heard it. Heard it go by.
So were you next? I mean, the sonar guy. I mean, how accurate is this hearing? Could it have been anything else? Could it have been like?
Let's say it this way: the sonar is extremely accurate.
Excellent. And you also mentioned Avi Loeb. Actually, most of my audience should know Avi Loeb has recently found the spherules out at the ocean floor. And you have a friend you mentioned as well in the Merge podcast that actually checked out some coordinates out under the Catalina or nearby the Catalina Islands. Amazing effort there. Can you explain what he found and what your thoughts are on that area?
Right. That was interesting. There is a geologic feature that I described on Ryan's show that right now I've not been able to find a natural explanation for. It looks like a wedge taken off a thing called a knoll. It looks like an underwater ridge, basically. And a wedge from it was totally carved out and horizontally displaced 2 kilometers. It's on the seafloor. It's at a depth of about 700 meters. And of course, I just want to find an explanation for it, but it does cause one to speculate. Is that evidence of undersea UAP interaction with the seafloor, or a location for undersea infrastructure where these things go? And so that's what my friend, Victor Vescovo is his name. He's a world famous undersea explorer. He's been diving in all the deepest trenches of the world, and is a human occupied submersible that he built. And he also acquired the ship to do it. And he spent $50 million of his own money to go mapping and exploring all around the world's oceans. And so at the time I knew him, I had an agreement signed with him when I was at NOAA for him to map and explore the oceans and share his data with us. And Victor, as we stayed in touch, told me he was going to do some checkout data collection of a new sonar system he put on a ship. And when I heard about it, it was off SoCal, and we were hearing all this news about SoCal UAP. I said, hey, if you really want to do a underwater expedition like none other, I got some coordinates for you. And I explained to him why, and he didn't laugh or not answer me. He said, send me the coordinates. And he did. And he went and mapped that to a higher resolution than we had before, but he wasn't able to get video on it. And that's what we really wanted. And so now that's the next step, is getting a remotely operated vehicle from a ship, tethered to a ship, and really getting some video on the feature and where it was taken from. And we'll see what we find.
Okay, can you tell us where it is?
No, I'm not.
Is it secret? Are you keeping this secret information? I assumed it would be secret.
I'm keeping the coordinates close because I've been approached by a producer from Netflix, and he may be funding an expedition to go dive on it, and I basically don't want anybody to beat me out on it. But I can tell you, it's in the Southern California bight, in between Catalina Island and Long Beach.
Oh, okay. So down in this area.
Yeah, in between. Yeah, where's Catalina? Right. Yeah, it's in that region.
Oh, cool. Okay, excellent. Yeah, and I had mapped, the Tic Tac basically went down somewhere in this area, I believe.
Yeah, that's correct. And Chris, it's important. Here's something important for people. I've seen a couple shows on TV speculating on undersea UAP bases in this region, and they picked out a feature in the region I mentioned. There was a lot of the speculation. The reason features will look like they do on this map is it's an amalgamation of a number of different data sources, some with very high resolution, so you see fine granularity in some of the features, and then some with very coarse resolution, and that's where you see some of the smearing. So a lot of the speculation is based off, it's incorrect, and it's based off artifacts in the data. And so I have a problem when people go and run off on these different issues when they don't really understand the sources of the data.
Yeah, exactly. Because I've messed around on here, and you see crazy shapes, where the Tic Tac or was under the water, or there's some object under the water. But how can you tell? Because if you zoom in, as I learned dealing with satellite imagery with targeting, is you have to know your source, right? You have to know how good your data is, and then here it's blurry,
Right. Interesting. And I know some people have come to me, and if you look at this database here, there are certain features down near Antarctica that are all linear, and people have said, oh my gosh, this is evidence of some non-natural feature. Is it UAP, generate or hiding infrastructure or whatever? And it's in the ocean side of this, Chris. I forgot where exactly, but all that means is that is a very data sparse region, and an oceanographic ship happened to make a transit with a very high resolution sonar to get some really nice pristine data that is unlike the rest of the interpolated data around it. So when you see linear features like that, you have to really understand where the source of the data is to be able to conclude what they are.
Who are, like Dr. Strangelove in that movie from the 60s with that weird mad scientist writing the nuclear bomb down to the earth, doing things without the knowledge, I can say personally for a fact, of the president and the Congress or the United Nations or the European Parliament or anyone else, that is really presenting an existential threat to all life on Earth because of this reckless behavior. So all of this needs to be exposed and reined in, and it should have happened. Well, first of all, it should have never gotten this far. When I was at Senator Barry Goldwater's home, he ran for president in 1964, before probably most people listening were alive. But when I was at his home, and Senator McCain took his seat in Arizona, and he just flat out said to me, he said it was a goddamn mistake then and a goddamn mistake now that this was ever kept secret by the military. So one of the big mistakes that happened in the 40s is that this entire subject became the province of the military and industrial complex rather than diplomats and scientists and more transparent programs. So I think that Frankenstein got created in the 40s and 50s, and it walked up off the table, and it's been lurking around the world ever since. So the question is, how do we, the people and our government, get this back under some kind of supervision and control so that would benefit humanity and do so in a rather expeditious fashion? Good news is a very significant number of people in the U.S. Congress now understand this is a problem, and they are moving quickly to try to investigate and get to the bottom of it. And we're assisting with that to the extent we can as an unfunded volunteer nonprofit group. I mean, we're not for profit, but we work with volunteers. We have very few staff, but we have so many dedicated people. And I have to say, I was on a wonderful show, a man I greatly admire, a Navy SEAL named Sean Ryan, a couple of months ago. And we've had such a great response from the military community of whistleblowers coming forward who know this is a problem and have courageously stepping forward. I think we'll have 4 or 5 of these whistleblowers that are new at the National Press Club event on June 12th and at our 2-day conference in Washington, D.C. the 2 days before on June 10th and 11th. And we'll provide a link for you guys if you want to come personally, or you can see it by streaming. It'll be on the streaming also, so you can see it remotely. And I think that the reason we're wanting to do this, and I've been asked to do it by some leaders in Washington, is because the people who are in Congress need the support of the people to pursue this, because the subject has such a patina of kookiness and weirdness and low esteem in the media that it's a bit of a PR problem for these members of Congress and for the White House. So we need to make it quite clear this is a serious matter and there are serious people involved, and there are bona fide military folks coming forward willing to step up to the plate and speak the truth, not just in the skiff at the Pentagon, but to the American people.
In 2022, Panasonic came out with a new camera, and that's the GH6. And the GH6 allows us to shoot at 120 frames per second. And we have these cameras modified so that they shoot in infrared. Now, the picture that you're seeing right now, that's 4 Blue Angels jets over the Pensacola Naval Air Station. And that was taken on May 2nd, 2023. And there's a UFO that's like passing right by it. The guy who told us how to do all this, I'm not the genius that figured this all out. The guy who told us how to do all this was Lincoln Lounsbury. And he has for a great many years, he's now retired, but for a great many years, he was a senior air traffic control person at the Washington, D.C. airport, the big one. And that's the most highly controlled airspace on the planet. And he came to us at Farsight in December of 2022 and said, basically, we think you should be doing this. And I said, okay, well, tell us. And we were in our studio, the same studio I'm in now. He brought a PowerPoint presentation. He brought Excel spreadsheets. He brought tons of examples of these UFOs that he was shooting right in Washington, D.C., right over the Capitol. I mean, this is like the most highly controlled airspace in the world. And our jaws dropped. And he said, the key is you have to shoot at a high frame rate, and then you have to shoot in infrared. Now, you can get some things in visible light, but it's relatively rare compared to what you get with infrared. And then he told us he told us the camera to get, the GH6. Now, we already were using Panasonic Lumix GH5 cameras. We use GH4 cameras and 5 cameras. But now, for us to be told to get a GH6, that was a natural evolution for us. And he told us the exact company to send it to get it modified so that it could do infrared. So we didn't think this stuff up. He told us, and here you have the most senior air traffic control person in the Washington, D.C. airport, which is the most highly controlled airspace on the planet, coming to our place. And he paid for the airline ticket to get here, the whole thing. We bought him lunch. That was it. But other than that, and he gave us everything. And then, so we just followed the instructions. And we started by taking video recordings in January of 2023, right over my house. And these recordings have to be short, like 10 to 20 minutes max, because you're shooting at 120 frames a second. And when you're shooting at 120 frames a second, when you get it in post, when you're editing it, we use Adobe Premiere, you have to slow it way down. So 10 minutes of video footage is hours of footage when you actually are slowing it way down, because you can't see these things, so they're going so fast. And he was the one who, when we started shooting, he was the one who analyzed our footage, a super senior air traffic control person, and told us the speeds. So he said these things are traveling 20,000 plus miles an hour, or 32,000 kilometers per hour. He was analyzing everything in terms of other aircraft that were in the locations. He had us using Flight Radar 24 to make sure that record everything with regard to what else is up there. And like this one that you're looking at right now is a cylindrical cigar-shaped UFO, and it passes right by a major airline jet, and it was doing multiple passes. This is like over my house, Chris, and so you have this cigar-shaped thing going 20,000 miles an hour. Chris, it can be the size of the Titanic flying right over your house. You're not going to see it if it's 20,000 miles an hour, 32,000 kilometers an hour. It's just too fast. But shooting at 120 frames a second, you can see it. And this is all shot. What you're looking at right now is infrared. Now, the first thing that you showed me, which was over Pensacola Naval Air Base, that was again with the Panasonic Lumix GH6. And that was in infrared, and that was 120 frames per second. And you can see that UFO is passing the jets. You're the airline, you're the pilot. So I'm assuming those jets are going like 550 miles an hour, and that UFO is clearly 4 or 5 times faster than them. They're almost looking like they're stationary. So you're the one who can estimate the speeds. I mean, it's clear as day, and everything was totally invisible when I did it. Like when I was shooting this thing, it was nothing. Nothing was in the sky except the Blue Angels jets. There was very little air wind. There were no bugs. There was no wind. There was no dust. It was just Blue Angels jets. And then when I put it in post, when I put it in Adobe Premiere and slowed it way down and applied some, some what we call LUTs, light, which are lookup tables for coloration to get it to pop out better, it was clear as day. My jaw dropped. Now, look, I've been studying UFOs and aliens since the 1990s in terms of formal stuff with remote viewing. So I'm used to this stuff. But when I saw these things right over my house or right over my camper at the Pensacola Naval Air Base, my jaw drops when I analyze the footage. Mind you, my jaw doesn't drop when I'm actually shooting because I can't see anything. It just looks like blue sky. And it's in the middle of the day at an arbitrary time. But typically over 10 to 20 minutes, we can easily find 30 to 40 UFOs right over the house or right over where we are. They're everywhere. Now, they're not completely everywhere. I did test this with the Pensacola Naval Air Station. I went in an afternoon that there was no flight traffic one time and there was nothing going on and I didn't get anything. I went to Kenya for 5 days to do shooting in Africa and I got one UFO, one clear UFO. So they're not every place all the time, but over major cities or they, for some reason, Lincoln Lounsbury, the air traffic control guy, he's the one who told me that they love air shows. I don't know how we knew that they loved air shows, but they love air shows. And why they like air shows, I have no idea. But he said, go down and do an air show. So I said, we took all of his advice so far. So I took the cameras down and did an air show. And I have recordings of literally hundreds and hundreds of UFOs during the air show. They swooped down like it was crazy. But and you saw one picture there with one passing the jet. Anyway, this cigar-shaped one that you're looking at right now, that was over my house in Atlanta. And, it's a major airline hub. Atlanta Airport is one of the busiest or the busiest airport on the planet. And that thing just flew right by a jet. And it wasn't just, you see multiple shots here. It wasn't flying once. It flew multiple times over the house. And I caught it a bunch of times. And, one of those times it flew right by this airline jet that was up there.
Thank you for watching. Please hit the like button. It really helps the channel. Consider subscribing. And a special thanks to all my patrons on patreon.com/Chris Lehto. This trip to Hessdalen could not be possible without them, as well as YouTube members. Thank you so much. And please consider helping the channel. Again, couldn't be possible without your support. And in November, I'll be going on this, The Transcendence of Consciousness, Ancient Egypt Uncovered with Nick Cook, JP Haig, Mohammed Ibrahim, and Ross Coulthart, actually. Thanks again to patrons. Could not do it without you guys. And I will give up-to-the-date, real-time information on patreon.com/Chris Lehto. So again, please sign up. Thanks again. Have a great day. Peace.